How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is Deck Ready, my channel all about the Steam Deck. In today's video, I've got 3 topics to cover. The first one is you've seen the white Steam Deck. It looks awesome, but I'm going to tell you why it's a good sign for the future. Second on the list, Valve has finally spoken out about all the anti-cheat stuff, and their response I don't think is good enough. And third, Phil Spencer just revealed why the Steam Deck is going to remain on top for the foreseeable future. All right, let's jump into this first news story here, which is all about the white Steam Deck. I saw this went up earlier in the week, but I already had 2 videos made, so I was like, everyone's gonna cover this, and it's a white Steam Deck. You know exactly what it is. It's yet another limited edition like the one that came out last year around the same time. It comes out on November 18th at 3 p.m. and if last year is to go by, you should be able to get one of these if you want one. There might be like an overload on Steam when people all try to log in to get one, but I sat there for like an hour last year and my purchase eventually went through. So it seems like even though it's limited, there's gonna be enough for everyone who wants a white Steam Deck. It's a 1TB OLED, but it's $679, so it's $30 more. It's pretty good, right? Like, it's a limited edition Steam Deck OLED. You know exactly what it is, but I think this is a good sign for the future because there's been a lot of talk about the Steam Deck 2, and I know people are sick of hearing about the Steam Deck 2 because it's like, it triggers people, right? It makes people go, what? I just spent $500, $600, $700 on this Steam Deck and they're already talking about a brand new one. This is ridiculous, and I completely agree. I think the Steam Deck is good enough to last for a very long time because while it is a gaming PC, it is also a gaming console. And when you buy into a console ecosystem, you buy in with the intention to keep that thing for at least 5 years or so. And a lot of people were nervous about that because PC stuff moves a whole lot faster. But if Valve is going through all the effort it takes to make a limited edition version of this console that comes with a special cleaning cloth and a special case, a different shell and everything like that, like that's an expensive endeavor to just put one of these random lines out, especially when you're working at the smaller volume that Valve is working with the Steam Deck compared to something like the Nintendo Switch or the PS5, which have special editions coming out left and right. So that shows commitment in my mind to this current version of the Steam Deck. And doing these limited edition drops I think is really smart on Valve's part because I noticed the comments from people where, you know, there's a lot of people who watch this channel or they watch my friend Rich on Fan the Deck or they watch my friend Bill over on Nerd Nest and they're just taking in all the info, right? Like they're like, I don't know if it's time yet to buy a Steam Deck. The other one might be right around the corner. But then they see this limited edition model and it looks cool. It's a little bit more expensive, but you're getting something for that more expensive version, like the 1TB SSD in the special colorway, and that's enough to convince people to take the plunge into the ecosystem. And when it comes to the Steam Deck, I root for the Steam Deck to succeed more than I do other consoles, mainly because it's like the underdog still at this point, right? Like it's very popular, it's very cool, but it still feels like a little bit of a cool kids club, right? Like when you're at the airport and you just by chance see someone else who has a Steam Deck, it's still small enough where you can give the little nod and be like, yeah, we're in the early buyers club for the Steam Deck. And the more they can get it out there, the more ubiquitous it's going to be. And the result of that, I think, is tenfold positive for everyone who owns one, because the more Steam Decks that are out there taking up the mind share of PC gaming, the more worth it is for developers to kind of make graphics presets that actually work on the Steam Deck and run well, or, you know, not use anti-cheat that's at the kernel level that blocks Linux from being able to use multiplayer in these games. The more Steam Decks that are out there selling games for these publishers, the less likely they're going to be to ignore it, because that's potential money for them that they're leaving on the table if they don't support it. And we've seen a lot more games this year specifically using Steam Deck specific graphics presets. I talk about Rogue Trader all the time because it's the current game I'm playing on the deck. I still got a bone to pick with 3.6. 3.6.20 fixed it. It was running at a rock solid 30 FPS again, and then I guess it was like 21 or 23 came out the next day, and it broke it again. So now it runs at like 15 FPS and I haven't been able to play it on my Steam Deck. So I don't have a lot to play right now because I was like all in on Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader. But the cool thing about it is the graphics preset that they have for Steam Deck not only is pretty high settings wise, like it's a lot of medium and high, doesn't use FSR at all, but when the updates aren't breaking the game, not the game updates, the actual Steam Deck OS updates, it runs really good. Like you see a few frame drops to 29 if you keep the limiter on at 30. Once in a while, like when you're in a battle with a lot of different ads just there to be killed in one shot, you'll see a little bit of a stutter when the camera is panning across the map, but it's like a turn-based CRPG. It doesn't need that perfect frame line, and it is as close to perfect as I've seen in a Steam Deck game. So when new games like that are much smaller than something like Elden Ring, for example, are including Steam Deck presets, that's good because that shows that developers are paying attention to the Steam Deck ecosystem and they're making their games work for it, which is great. When it comes to AAA stuff like God of War Ragnarok or Ghost of Tsushima, we've seen Sony kind of push the Steam Deck a little bit. They're like, we got it verified at launch. We all know that the verification system is garbage on the Steam Deck and it doesn't really mean anything. I hope in the future, the companies that are porting these games over that are bigger or, you know, classified as too big to run well on the Steam Deck get a little bit more TLC, some more care, some more energy put into the ports to maybe unlock some good graphic settings that, while much lower than what you'd get out of a high-end gaming PC or even a PS5, still manage to look good on this handheld. Because as someone who loved the Nintendo Switch when it came out, we saw developers kind of working overtime to not only port their games over to that console when it started selling like gangbusters, but they came up with all sorts of crazy tricks that they could run in the back end to not only get the games running in the first place, but running extremely well. Sometimes they took like months to do, which really sucked. Like The Witcher 3, they made this whole, you know, big song and dance about the entire game being held on the cartridge, and then it came out and it didn't run so good, so they did a huge patch, which thankfully was like totally optional. But still, it was nice to see all these developers putting in extra legwork to make their games run well on the Switch. I'd love to see that continue on with the Steam Deck, and I feel like getting this new hardware, this limited edition hardware that's growing the ecosystem as a whole, that's the best way to get to that future. As for this new limited edition OLED, I want one just because it's cool, but I'm not going to buy it because my limited edition that I got last year is still holding up pretty good. I will say that there are some problems with the molding. It cracks, like the screws might be too tight or something, but if you look at your limited edition OLED, if you got one too, it's really easy to see where it cracks. It's like right in the, it lines up with the screw. It's like the top left or top right screw on the top, like on the back plate, and then the bottom left and bottom right screw on the back plate, that plastic cracks. And it's not a big, like deep enough crack where you can rub your fingernail over it and feel it, but if you're looking for it, you'll definitely see it. And unfortunately, iFixit doesn't sell the back plate because it's a limited edition model. So if I wanted to get it fixed, I'd have to go through the RMA process, which would mean not having my Steam Deck for weeks. And I don't want to do the RMA if United Radio is involved, because just look up the horror stories. They're the people who do the fixes on the Nintendo Switch, and there's like millions of stories of people sending their Switch in for repair and getting a completely different Switch back, or sending in limited edition Joy-Cons and getting regular edition Joy-Cons back because someone swiped them at the place where they're repairing the actual console. And I had a nightmare story with them too. You can go back to the video from like 2 years ago where I sent in my Steam Deck to be repaired and they held it for ransom for an issue that I didn't even cause. So yeah, I think I'm gonna live with the cracks, and just spending $700 when I just bought a PS5 Pro doesn't seem like the smartest move right now. So I'm not going to buy one, but if you don't have a Steam Deck and you're not necessarily hurting for cash, like you're not waiting for the sale that's definitely going to happen around Christmas, I think you might be good if you pick up this Steam Deck OLED, and you're definitely good if you're someone who's like, is the Steam Deck 2 coming out? No, I don't think the Steam Deck 2 is coming out, and we can rest easy knowing that our Steam Deck is going to be the cream of the crop for at least a few more years. Anyway, that brings us to the second news story here, which is that Valve is thankfully paying attention to these anti-cheat issues, but I'm not super thrilled with their response. So there's a Japanese website called Automaton. They actually just interviewed Hideo Kojima about buying back the rights for Death Stranding, which was very interesting. You obviously have to translate it, but because the Steam Deck is popular in Japan right now, they did an interview with two people from Valve. Of course, it was Lawrence Yang and Pierre Liu, and this is what they had to say about the issue. We've been monitoring the trend of games requiring kernel level access for their anti-cheat technologies and not supporting Steam Deck as a result. We are extremely aware of the critical need for countermeasures against cheating in online games, but are also considering options carefully. Some of the approaches popular now in the industry might present problematic trade-offs for the end user in the long term. And it's like, yeah, duh, they're just saying what we all already know. Obviously, literally using kernel level anti-cheat that blocks Linux access, blocks the Steam Deck, and that creates a not great situation for people on the Steam Deck. And I'd like to see Valve start going out and talking to these actual companies and say, look, we're willing to send some people over to help you figure out how to block some of these cheats in Linux, because Valve has a dedicated team working on Linux, obviously, because they're making a fork of it for SteamOS 3.0. And if you don't think there's a precedent for that, Sony has been doing it this entire generation with the PS5. There are many third-party games that perform better on the PS5, but also heavily utilize the DualSense features like haptic feedback and adaptive triggers, because Sony, free of charge to these developers, sends a team to the developer to show them how to implement these features in the game. And I think that's resulted in a console that feels different from its counterpart, which is essentially the same thing under the box, the Xbox Series X, but also a console that feels different in the way you interact with it, because the controller stuff doesn't just become a gimmick that causes reduced battery life and makes the controller more expensive. So it's a win-win all around. A lot of these games like Apex Legends, Battlefield 1, the list goes on and on. They're games that people want to play on their Steam Deck. They were regularly in at least the top 50 games most played on the Steam Deck. And because of the cheats, these companies are more than willing to just throw that audience to the wind, because they don't want to reduce the experience of potential moneymakers on console and PC. And while I understand that, it's punishing the people who don't cheat, which is the vast majority, for the actions of the vast minority, which are people who want to cheat in online games, which I don't even think is fun, because like you're not even playing a game, you're just cheating and being mean to people, which sucks. I'm sure the Fox or my friend Rich over at Fan the Deck have a more nuanced take on this with a lot more knowledge behind it, because that's why I'm being so surface level, but I'm like the normal consumer. At the end of the day, I bought the Steam Deck to play video games next to my wife on the couch while she watches Dancing with the Stars, or play games in bed. And anything that stops me from playing the games I want to play is obviously bad. So I feel like it's not like up to Valve to fix it, but it would go a long way with me as just a general consumer and fan of the product that I bought if they actually went out of their way to do this. It's a win-win all around, because at the end of the day, the gaming experience on the Steam Deck will be improved. Anyway, that brings us to the third news story of today's video, which is that Phil Spencer just basically told you to buy a Steam Deck. So we know handhelds are big right now, right? Like we've got the Steam Deck, we've got the ROG Ally, we've got the Zotac Zone, we've got the MSI Claw, we've got the Lenovo Legion Go, we've got the Switch 2 coming up. PlayStation and Xbox are also working on handhelds, and just based on the Xbox rumor mill, a lot of people were assuming that the Xbox handheld was a lot closer than it actually is. Phil Spencer just did a bunch of interviews with Bloomberg and other websites, and in those interviews, he was asked about this upcoming Xbox handheld, and he just put it out there that while they are working on one for sure, it is a few years off at this point. I know a lot of people out there are holding out hope for it to be coming out a lot sooner than that, because they pay into Game Pass, they pay the $20 a month or whatever, and want a way without buying an unofficial like third-party PC like the ROG Ally to actually take advantage of these games. For some reason, Microsoft is not interested in actually getting their Xbox app, which is terrible, up and running on Linux, which blows my mind, because it's like a win-win for them. It'd be a good way to get people off of Steam and into the Xbox ecosystem, but their solution of streaming through Edge seems to be good enough for them, and it's not good enough for me. Going back to the original news story, knowing that Valve is committed to the current Steam Deck for at least a few years now, and they're releasing limited edition models, and knowing that Sony and Xbox's handhelds, where you might already have a different library, are a few years off, I don't think there's been a better time to buy a Steam Deck. I mean, even if you want to get in super cheap, you can get them so much reduced price on eBay used for a Steam Deck LCD. You could get a used OLED. You could wait for the Christmas or Thanksgiving sale, at which point the Steam Deck will 100% go on sale. We might even see the first reduction in price of the Steam Deck OLED, which would be awesome. There's so many incentives to buy a Steam Deck right now, including all the OS support that's come to it since it came out, all the games that are getting native graphic presets, all the games that are having effort put in by the developers to actually look and run correctly on the Steam Deck. I feel like there's just never been a better time to buy one, especially considering how far off handhelds like the Xbox and PlayStation handheld are. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you in today's video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great weekend. Thanks for watching, and shape on.